exploring how islands and dimensions are created in the monster world. And we've got a lot of juicy theories today, so make sure to stick around until the end, guys. So first of all, I want to go over what we do know. So the first thing that we know about how the monster world was created is the Primordial Cosmic Hush. This was a huge period of silence where nothing existed inside of the monster world. This was silencio. Nothing happened inside of this time. However, what started off everything inside of the monster world and created it is known as the Big Clangor. This is the monster world's Big Bang, basically. Every single location inside of the monster world was created from this, whether it be the living core that Firehaven is inside of, the volcano, and the living ocean, which is the ocean of the monster world. Everything, all of his islands and everything were created from this, including the Celestials. The Celestials were the only monster species that we know of as a direct result of the Big Clangor, which makes them out to be quite interesting monsters, as they were the first ones inside of the monster world. We also know that this Big Clangor happened straight from the living core. The living core is the center of the monster world, so as you guys can imagine, this Big Clangor that happened, it sprung forward from this living core, and it went everywhere from that point. As Colossals then came afterwards, so they weren't created from the Big Clangor, and these Colossals, they started creating the monster world as we know it today. They used the Ethereal experiments in the Pocket Dimension, and then they went on to do the Great Song, which made all of the monsters inside of the monster world. So that's basically a pretty quick summary of how the monster world was formed, but we're missing out something quite important here, and that is the World Tree. The World Tree is where all of the dimensions are sat on inside of the My Singing Monsters multiverse, such as Ethereal Island's Pocket Dimension, where Magical Sanctum and Ethereal Island are, and the Prime Reality, which is where the monster world is. So that's a quick summary of everything there, but what don't we know now, so we can get to them juicy parts? So the big question lingering around is obviously, how did this Big Clangor happen in the first place? This Big Clangor is the offset, basically, for everything that happened inside of the monster world. So if we can work out potentially how that happened, I think we've got a pretty good incline today of working out how the islands and so forth were created in the first place. This is by far the biggest question I think we've got to answer today, so cluck your heels in with Rare Claw Vera and getting that car ride ready, guys. The next question what we've got to answer today is to how the Colossals managed to access the World Tree. We mentioned the Colossals managed to create the monsters from the Ethereal experiments, but they did this by accessing the powers of the World Tree itself. So in order for the Colossals to be able to do this in the first place, they've got to have had some kind of way or transportation mechanism to be able to go to and forth from the World Tree. So that's another question. But his final question today is, where is the World Tree? What is it? How is it done? What even is this thing? Because we know so much about it, but it turns out we also know so little. So perhaps we can work out a little bit more about this thing today. So let's hook up to our theory brains and prepare for our lore roller coaster today. First of all, I want to go back to Her's trailer. Her's trailer relayed everything out to me. It was the very first mention of the potential behind keys. If we have a look inside of here, it revealed that Her, as a joke of course, is Monster Overlord of all realms of the multiverse and keeper of the Clangor keys. This was our very first mention that keys actually come from the Big Clangor. And I was mind-boggled by this because this was just a joke at the time, but to me, it was everything, okay? And this was further elaborated on inside of the Crucible. Inside of the Crucible, it said, the power of the condensed ancient stardust from the Big Clangor contained within each key will be pushed to its limit inside of the Crucible structure. Taking note to inside of the bio of the evolutionary potential of each key. So therefore, from this is quite the revelation here. We've got keys now, and we know that they are a direct result from the Big Clangor. And we don't really know too much that came from the Big Clangor, other than the landmarks, and there's not really something quite specific that ties everything together, almost like an object or something that perhaps came from it. And these being forged from the Big Clangor itself, I think it's a really important tidbit. It might prove quite useful towards answering his questions today. But now we've looked at the keys, I want to stretch out a little bit more, because we've looked inside of the Prime Reality at what we can regarding the creation of the monster world, and I think that's all we're going to get from that. So let's zoom out to the World Tree, where all of the dimensions are sat on. For these dimensions, again, not too much to be known here. However, what we do know is that the dimensions have been created at different points. So for example, the Thumpetsverse came before the Prime Reality, and therefore I think that might prove quite useful also. But again, it just provides another question. There's just too many questions regarding this, okay? If these dimensions didn't forge together at the same time, then how on earth did they come forward at different points? We know about the big clangor, which resulted in the monster world, but now there's questions everywhere because how on earth were these other dimensions created beforehand? And how did that process happen? There's just so many questions, but I think this might be our final question before we can reel it back in right now. Because besides this, we know from his world tree, we know that it's made from amber, which is what we see around Cana on Tribal Island, and with things like the Freed thing. It's quite an important lore piece inside of the monster world, important lore object. It makes sense too, seeing as though it's from the world tree itself. And we also know of the saplings from the world tree too. For the saplings, we have the new one, the monkey hotel in the background of the Echoes of Eco skin. This was found originally inside of Grapefruit Grove. Well, the monkeys used to sit inside of that game. We see that at the back there. And then we also know of the Great Tree, which comes from the Thumpies verse, a very large tree with a door in the middle. Just like to the Grapefruit Grove one, it provided an interior where you'd find all of the Thumpies inhabitants from that dimension, just like to the monkeys inside of the Monkey Hotel one. And we also have as Tall Tree, which notably isn't quite as featured as the other ones. We have as doors, we have as interiors on the other ones, but this sapling is just bare bones. This is the most bare tree you can get, guys. And it's also, I think, got the lamest name too, the Tall Tree. Whatever though, whatever. Because moving on from this, I think if all of these saplings have somewhat similar features of including the Tall Tree, with them having all of these interiors, and that isn't even to say that the Tall Tree couldn't, as we don't really know all too much about it, but considering all of these features that we do know about, it's quite assumable that the World Tree might have similar features to this. It might have an interior, it might have doors to it, and these are all things that we've not really considered. We know it's made of amber, sure, but other than that, we've not really stretched beyond that to consider the World Tree in general, I do think. And this interior design and doors being surrounded inside of it could prove quite useful towards perhaps understanding how this World Tree might work. But going back to his doors here, this is where the theory for me, the door just it slammed shut, okay? I was like, oh my god, I have made this theory right now. I shut that door on Spirit and I took no liberties, okay? I was all over it, all right? Spirit is my least favorite monster, by the way, so yes, we do shut the door. It suddenly hit me that these doors that we might find amongst the World Tree, they might actually explain how the dimensions are accessed in the first place. It took me back to Encanto and how the different people inside of the family, all of these new doors would appear, and these new places and realms when new family members were born or whatever, and I started thinking this could be how dimensions might be accessed on the World Tree itself. And it would explain potentially why some dimensions came before, because if these doors are created at different points and these new realms inside of the My Singing Monsters multiverse, then that would just summarize up that question very well. And for what our doors could look like on the World Tree, I asked Uksus to make a design for the Prime Reality door. So on screen, we've got fauna from all of the different islands. You can see some from Fairy, Light, Water Island, Firehaven. Basically, they've got every single island going here, okay? I asked them to make up ones for the main kind of ones, like the natural islands and magical ones. I feel like that would be represented here. And you can also see some nice shrubbery going around this. A very nice design from Uksus here, as I do think each door being different amongst the World Tree would be a really intricate and awesome design choice, if we were ever to see it, of course. But another question spirals from this MPG, doesn't it? If we are to have doors, or whatever accessibility point might be on this World Tree, then how on earth do these doors form? We've said that new dimensions coming forward, this would be how it happens, but how do they form in the first place? Well, first of all, the World Tree itself, it probably would need to grow out a bit, wouldn't it? I'm imagining, seeing as though it's a tree, it's probably going to keep growing, and therefore these doors might come forward from the tree growing and new doors sprouting off it. But how is this process going to happen in the first place? Is it just a case that the tree grows, or does something activate it? Well, if you were to ask me, then automatically the thing that I'd think of when it's made of amber and potentially other substances is that potentially this tree needs something inserted into it so that it can evolve in the first place. I don't think it would be the case that this amber tree, going by all requirements that we know of as well, with relics and keys, whatever inside of the game, it's not going to be the case that this World Tree is just going to activate and grow out itself, is it? So in order for this growth to occur, I think we need to look at what it's made up of in the first place. Amber, this still substance. And it got me thinking, if only there was something related to amber, something like an island that we could look back to solve this mystery. And then it hit me. Amber Island. Perfect. Amber Island, it's always been a huge oddity to me inside of the game because it's named after a huge substance, yet seems to have nothing to do with it. Yet, also today, I think it very well might do. If we need something with evolutionary potential for this amber tree to grow, we've just gone over something that does just that inside of that description, haven't we? Keys. The crucible on Amber Island. The evolutionary potential of keys is unlocked. And this could be the thing that we need in order for the evolutionary potential of the world tree to unlock. What better can you ask for than a substance that was made from the big clangor of potentially each dimension? These keys, they came from the impact itself. They are made from the dust of the impact. It's not like everything else which was created as a result of the impact. This was the impact. So whatever came from this big clangor in the first place, that must be how the dimensions are created on the world tree, I started thinking. And guys, mind blown moment right now, right? These keys seem as though they were made from the big clangor and they could be inserted into each door. That could be how the big clangor was created in the first place, because the keys came from it. Like I said, nothing else has, and therefore it makes so much sense for something to have come from the impact to have created it in the first place, guys. So therefore, each key unlocks the evolutionary potential of the world tree and allows for the dimensions to take place. Guys, I don't know how I came up with this theory, but it's just insane. So let's go back here a bit. So you access each door through a key, and keys could open up new doors, allowing for the world tree to expand and for you to keep on growing out the world tree. And then as these keys are inserted into each door, it also offsets each big clangor for that individual dimension, which it would explain finally how dimensions and islands might be created. But hang on, guys, because I do think we are going to be able to pull out even more loose strings today. So hang in a moment there, guys. So regarding these keys then, I want to drag up to Uksus's design here. They've made such a cute finger one. I'm sorry, I really like the eyes. They're so goofy. Okay. I asked them to make different keys for each realm, as even though we have the ones from the monster world, I'm presuming that they might look quite different depending on how the dust is put together and compacted depending on the individual dimension. So they've made a fingier one, which is represented through the thing. We've got an higher plane one for Gold Island and Amber Island, which is the dimension where those two are found. We've got the one for the Thumpies verse, where Thumpies are found. We've also got one for the Prime Reality, which had to be the Colossal Sigil, because that's the Colossal's realm, ain't it, guys? And with that, then, I think we've solved how dimensions and islands continue to be made through inputting these keys and causing the big clangors in the first place, how the world tree might expand, and how the world tree might be accessed to, which isn't something we've discussed, but seeing as though we've got the doors now, then I'm assuming the door can allow you to travel between the world tree and the other dimensions too, because you'll find the door and then you'll just be able to travel up to it, wouldn't you? But still, I think this doesn't answer where the door is, because the door must be somewhere out there if there is a door to the world tree itself. So if this door connecting the Prime Reality to the world tree is here, then I think we need to go back to our knowledge on the world tree being accessed in the first place, because we know that the Colossals, they managed to get the powers for the power of creation by harnessing the power of the world tree. But where did they do this? Well, it's always been said that the access point was inside of the living core, and this is where, again, it comes together really nicely as it consolidates, doesn't it, guys? That the dimensional gateway, the door, whatever it might be, is situated inside of the living core. And guys, it goes deeper, because these Colossals we know inside of the Dawn of Fire, that these guys were able to transport themselves between all the different dimensions when dimensional accessibility wasn't possible at that point. You have all your dimensions open and free right now inside the monster world, but back then inside of the timeline there was no dimensional accessibility. So the Colossals, the way that they must have managed to go to and from the pocket dimension to experiment with the Ethereals, for example, that must have been through these doors. They must have had access to them, and they must have been going to and from the world tree. And if you want to put that strawberry on top of that pudding, if we're looking at where the big clangor initially started from, it started from the living core. And as we've just said, guys, the door that accesses the world tree would also be found inside of the living core. So putting two and two together now, it makes a lot of sense that those doors would be the offsets that began the big clangor, and that ties our theory up in such a lovely bow. This just explains explains so much, guys, doesn't it? So I would really like for this accessibility to be true, because you know what? It summarizes so well so many theories, so many lingering questions that I've had about the franchise for so long, and when it hit me when I saw Her's trailer, I was just all over it. I really want this to be true, okay? I will see you. Remember to slam that door shut on Spirit, alright?